Hello everyone and welcome to my deck profile for Bladedancers. This will probably be the last, if not only deck profile I'll do for Bladedancers on my channel, because the game is effectively over, so at least for the EN side. So without further ado, let's get into it. Obviously it's a Katana World deck, so we got a Katana World flag, and then the buddy I have is Steel Frame Swordsmith Kurogane Hayabusa. The text is actually decently tiny, so I'm actually trying to get it pretty close to the screen so you can see it pretty well. But he's a little expensive at 2 gauge, but he does gain 2 souls as well, so pretty justifiable, I think. Excel Blades on the field can't be destroyed or leave the field by your opponent's card effects. At the start of each player's attack phase, if your equipped Excel Blade is standing, you gain 2 life, deal 2 damage to your opponent, and for the turn, all your opponent's cards must attack if able. And he has innate penetrate, triple attack, and soul guard. He's the main size 2 you want on the field. The Excel Blade protection is nice. Keep in mind, the monsters are only Bladedancers. The Excel Blades are the items and the impacts. I suppose the impacts won't be destroyed per se on the field, but so Excel Blade, this effect is only for protecting your item. And yeah, the 2 life, deal 2 damage is nice, but the crucial thing is your opponent having to attack if able. There's kind of a downside of the deck before was your opponent could just say, I end turn, and try to have you eventually deck out. But with this card, it kind of forces your opponent's hand. No pun intended. So, moving on to the first set of size 1s for the deck. The deck only has size 1s and size 2s for monsters. Is one of the tutors, Silver Orchid Swordsman Suzu. You pay a gauge to play her. When she enters, you can grab an Excel Blade, so basically either your item or your impact from your hand and shuffle your deck. And when she attacks, if you have an Excel Blade equipped, she has penetrating double attack, so that's not a high bar to meet. And honestly, she probably won't even be on the field that long. She's mainly just for the tutor effect, because she will usually be swapped out by the next size 1, which is Young Ally Swordsman Shakudo. His call cost is you just put a Bladedancer from your drop zone into his soul. Damage dealt by effects of Excel Blade is increased by 1, so that means only the impact damage will be increased by 1. And then when card effects do deal damage to your opponent, even if it's let's say it's Kurogane and his burn once per turn, or the burn 2 once per turn, whenever a card effect deals damage to your opponent, you gain a gauge. So he's a nice little consistent gauge gain resource as well. So him and Shakudo here on Kurogane is usually what my final board setup is. So next up, speaking of, we got one more size 1. I know it might be unexpected, but I do run 2 copies of Nano Machine Ninja Tsukikage Ribi. He's a good tutor for both of the size 1s, because when he enters the field, you can grab 2 size 1 Katana World monsters with different names other than Tsukikage himself, and add it to your hand and shuffle your deck. If you do grab 2, you discard a card. So he's kind of like a tutor for a tutor, if you're trying to find Suzu, or a tutor for Shakudo if you're trying to look for him. Usually with him, I tend to, I'm trying to think, I think I usually just tend to grab 1 card of just whatever I need. But if your hand's a little cloggy and, you have some spare cards you want to just discard, you could always just grab a Suzu and a Shakudo and then just discard a card. And honestly, that card, if it's a Bladedancer, could pay for Shakudo's call cost. So, Tsukikage on the field won't stay very long. He's just meant to tutor. I know you could say, well, why don't you just run 3 copies, or run 1 more copy of Suzu and 1 more copy of Shakudo and not run Tsukikage at all. This is nice to help facilitate, because let's say each of these are 1 copy of these. Well, if you only find Suzus, then you don't find your Shakudos, and if you have all Shakudos, you might get only Shakudos and not get any Suzus. So at least with one of them, each of these basically being a wild card of each card, you can hope it's kind of more consistent that you'll at least find 1 copy of each, basically. Let me move these cards back out. Alright, next is 4 copies of a size 2. You've probably heard me mention way too many times if you watched other deck profiles, but Guardian Electro Beast Gorio. She's just a good consistency card where you can call her once per turn, and when she enters the field, just look at the top 3 cards of your deck, grab one, and put it to your hand. And since this, you can grab literally any card, you just have to tell your opponent you're grabbing a card. You don't have to show your opponent what you're grabbing. And she's not going to stay on the field long. You're probably going to call over her with something else very shortly after. So, hooray for more consistency. Up next is our buddy. 4 copies of Steel Frame Swordsman Kurogane Hayabusa. I already kind of went over him, so there's not much more to say, but he's kind of the main size 2 you want on the field. So, next is 3 copies of the weapon, Excel Blade, God/Kanesada Sinuichi. You put up to 2 Excel Blades or Bladedancers in total from your drop. I'm going to get a little bit closer because, wow, this text is smaller than I thought. Let me restart that. Put up to 2 Excel Blades or Bladedancers in total from your drop zone into its soul, and you pay 2 life. You can't call monsters to your center. If you do, before I continue, just one quick thing. If you do call a monster to the center before you equip this weapon, that's fine. It stays on the field. You just can't call anymore after that. It's not like that. I just want to clarify that just so people don't think, oh, the monster in the center has to go away or something like that. Nope, you just can't call anymore after that. Next effect is all Bladedancers on the field can't be rested and their abilities can't be nullified by your opponent's card effect, so that just protects Sinuichi from your opponent trying to mess with this and your other cards. It has counterattack, but it's a special counterattack in the sense of it will counterattack all the cards that attack in the battle. So normal counterattack is, let's say there's a let's start from the scratch. With normal counterattack, if a single monster attacks, you counterattack and you destroy it, right? If a link attack occurs and you counterattack the link attack, you only choose 1 card out of the link attack to destroy. This card's counterattack is a little more enhanced, where it says if there is a link attack of 2 or more, this counterattacks everything. Now, granted, if the monsters have anti-destruction effects, obviously they don't get destroyed. But if they don't, then it would counterattack and destroy all the cards. So I'm just trying to clarify the counterattack their effect. And then it has Soul Guard with the equip costs and counterattack, obviously. So don't worry about having to get 2 different. I mean, it's not a high bar to meet anyways, but if you're kind of missing 1 card to put into its soul, don't worry, especially with your buddy having the anti-destruction effect for Excel Blades. Sinuichi is usually pretty safe. So, yeah, that's kind of the main sword that you'll never attack with, but you just have to equip. Next, I usually don't do impacts next, but it's kind of crucial for the deck, so we'll just kind of go over it. But 4 copies of Excel Skill of EI Kamikaze. I don't know why I said Kamikaze. But, well, it's a common English pronunciation, I suppose. But it's an impact, but you can play it during the battle phase. You only cast it if you are being attacked, and if your equipped Excel Blade is standing. You pay 2 gauge, you nullify the attack, and for the turn, nullify the abilities of all attacking cards and destroy them. And then you draw, that's a little covered there, but you draw 2 cards and deal 3 damage to your opponent. What was nice about this one, other than Godspeed was the original impact, is the destruction is not the damage is not dependent on the destruction. Godspeed it was, you had to destroy something in order to burn your opponent. And also the draw 2 cards is just insane. I'm surprised that's even on this card, but the draw 2 card, there's nothing like that on the Godspeed impact, so this card is just basically a straight upgrade. The only, I guess, negative downside, if I had to give it any kind of downside, is it costs 2 gauge instead of the Godspeed impact was a gauge and a life. But there's enough cards in this deck that you get gauge that it really should not be that big of a deal. You'll see as we go along. So next, going back to spells, going to spells, we never went to spells, is 4 copies of Kabuki Mai. It's a tutor for the deck. You pay 2 life, and you can grab a monster with Kurogane, so your buddy, and up to 1 Excel Blade from your deck and add to your hand, so that can be either the impact or your item. And you can only cast the spell once per turn. So, really good tutor. Just run 4 for consistency's sake. Next, getting into draw spells, is Forging from Fire. Just 4 copies of it. You can only cast it if you have a Bladedancer on the field. You draw a card. Then if you have an Excel Blade equipped, draw a card, and you only cast this once per turn. Bladedancers are everything. Monster spells, everything. Excel Blades, like I mentioned before, are items and impacts. So really, the very bare minimum you need to get this card to go off is just to equip your item, because that is a Bladedancer and an Excel Blade. Otherwise, you would still need, I guess you could at least just call a monster and play this to draw 1 card with Bladedancer. But this card is basically calling for you to have your item equipped to draw 2. Next is another draw spell. Not from Bladedancers, but still a good draw spell, because there's enough souls in the deck. It's 3 copies of Hiding Oni. You drop a soul from a card on your field, and you gain a gauge and draw 2. Your item has soul, your monsters have soul, between Kurogane and Shakudo. There really should not be a difficulty dropping a soul from somewhere to activate Hiding Oni. So, just a really another nice tutor spell. Next up is 3 copies of... And I actually want to see if I can try to get this into 4 copies, because I don't see why not. But Fusion Style, Stance of Staring Ichi. You only cast it during your opponent's attack phase, and if you have an Excel Blade equipped, counter, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put up to 2 from among them to your hand, and put the rest into your gauge. You only cast this once per turn, so it's another nice little filter. Actually, maybe with it only being castable on your opponent's turn, or no, it's during each player's attack phase. I'm sorry. So yeah, I mean that's why I wanted it to be 4, because even if you get a couple in your hand, you play one during your turn, you play one during your opponent's turn, you come back to your turn, you play another one. So I don't see why you couldn't run this at 4, but I have it at 3 at the moment. But it's a good, check top 3, put 2 to your hand, and gain a gauge. So just another, it's almost basically a Hiding Oni, just a little bit slower. That's really the only issue I have with it, is you can only cast it during the attack phase. So you can't use this to set up your board at all. It has to already be set up, and then this is just like, just whipped cream on top of the ice cream, it's just extra stuff. So I don't know if that's probably a weird analogy, but you get what I'm saying. Next is 4 copies of Fusion Style Training Grounds Kazaba. It's a set spell. All Bladedancers get 2,000 power, and their effects can't be nullified by your opponent's effects. And during your turn, when a Bladedancer on your left or right is destroyed, you gain 2 life and deal 2 damage. This is more to make your opponent kind of debate if they want to swing into the monsters on your side. When you're forced to attack because of Hayabusa, do you want to attack the side? Because if you attack the side, you're still going to be burned, and I'm still going to gain life. Or do you want to just go for face? So this really just makes it a tough dilemma. The thing that sucks, though, is there is no kind of tutor for this set spell. You just have to hopefully draw into it, which is why I run 4. But yeah, it's just it kind of creates a damned if you do, damned if you don't moment for your opponent. So, plus also, before I forget, this burn effect, if you have Shakudo on the field, you do gain a gauge as well. So keep that in mind with this. But you do not burn for an extra damage, because it is not an Excel Blade. Next, we're getting into the attack nulls, is Fusion Style Steadfast Sequence the first. You only cast it during your opponent's turn if your equipped Excel Blade is standing. You gain 2 gauge, you gain 2 life, and then for the next time you take damage, it's reduced to 0. So, and you want reduced to 0 effects, because that's how you can still trigger counterattack. If you nullify attacks, counterattack doesn't trigger. So that's why you'll notice none of the cards in here actually nullify attacks, but they just reduce damage to 0. Also, this is totally fine for just during your opponent's turn, and if you just need 2 gauge and 2 life or something, such as maybe the Excel Blade, for example. It doesn't have to be played only when your opponent is attacking, like a lot of attack nulls. So it's a good resource gain as well, if nothing else. Next attack null is 4 copies of Recover Veil. Obviously, it's a nice little bit of hand protection with the first effect. Not that that's the core reason to play this card, but it's just a nice little side effect. You can gain 2 gauge. You can counter and choose one of the following 2 at any time. Either gain 2 gauge, or next time you take damage, reduce to 0. So the 2 gauge is nice if you need it for your impact. Or, again, the attack is reduced to 0, so then counterattack can still proc if that is what you need. So normally I think I use this for the gauge game, because obviously you want to finish the game with the impact. But yeah, I mean, Recover Veil is just kind of, it's really almost eerie how well this works for the deck, even though it's a generic. But yeah. Another alternative option is Kagura Blossom Dancer. Let me see if I still have it. Hold on. Mainly for the, where is it? There it is. Mainly for the reduced damage to 0. If you can't find Recover Veils, that's another alternative option, because of the for the turn next time damage that you can reduce to 0. Obviously, the Electro Deity item part is kind of pointless, but yeah, as just as an alternative option if you really wanted something that was close to the same thing. Next is, sorry for me trying to get my cards back together. And then last is just a copy of Demon Waystalker Fubuki. This one, I don't really know how much is worthwhile to run in the deck. I mean, obviously you get some life gain, so it's like the 2 life is not a huge deal. But with there only being 1 spell, I mean, maybe I could arguably replace this for that 4th copy of Ichi. But it's not a bad card. The life gain in the deck is pretty good, so the pay 2 life is not a big deal. It's really just, if you get there, you get there, cool. If not, it's not the end of the world. So that is the last one of that. And then the sideboard, I have 2 that I think are perfectly fine. The third option is probably kind of more just, I think you could choose something else if you want, but let's go with the first 2 here. First one's 4 copies of Cherry Blossom Dance. This is to both kind of help protect your item, but also if your opponent plays cards from the drop a lot, cool, you mess with their deck. So, but if they have cards that kind of really mess with your weapon a lot, you can at least have essentially another soul for your weapon. So you got that. Next up is 3 copies of Heavy Blade Swordsman Namari. He's more of a spell than a monster, but during an attack on your opponent's turn, if you have a Bladedancer on the field, you can call this from your hand and redirect the attack to him. And during your opponent's turn, when he's destroyed, so essentially you're hoping he dies by battle, which is not hard because he only has 1,000 defense. But during your opponent's turn, when he's destroyed, you put an Excel Blade from your drop to your hand. So ideally, you want to grab the impact. So you could like play the impact. When they swing again, call him, he gets killed, grab the impact again, and play the impact again. So if you kind of really need a few more copies of the impact to finally like get your opponent to lose, then you can run this to try to get some more copies in your hand. And then last is, and this is probably the most flexible option, but I run 3 copies of Spider Thread Art. You pay gauge in life, and at counter speed, you choose a total of 2 items or spells on the field. If you have 10 or less cards in your drop, you bounce the cards to hand. If you have 15 or more, you destroy them. I try to aim for the bouncing, but if you get more than 15, then I guess you're destroying. This is more to kind of help mess with your opponent, or if they're kind of playing cards that might mess with you. I know there's a lot of anti-destruction. There's a moderate amount of anti-bounce. So this is kind of, come or go if you do want to run it. I'm not saying it's crucial or anything. But, it's another option. So that's pretty much it. Let me know if you guys have any questions or comments in the video. But, yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good day.